We are closing in on the final edition of the college football playoff rankings, but I don't think the Utah Utes are going to like what they see in tonight's rankings.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen and view of the day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. Thank you for making the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Huge shout out to our everydayers who make us your first listen and view of the day, and you guys can as well too. Make sure you like and subscribe. My name is JT Wistrcill. Excited to be joined by the host of the Runnin' Hoops pod, Andrew Crowley, kind enough to join me here. And Andrew, when you're talking about this Utah football team, obviously they still want to be a CFP team. They're a top 15 team right now, but I mean, honestly, I think it's more likely they fall. Like, Vandy's looked incredibly impressive over these last two games. We win by 10, but didn't look impressive against Kansas. This defense has not been good overall. Bend don't break, I guess, with the pick six, but that's been the thing. So I don't see any. I really wish I could tell everyone listening this otherwise, because I love this school so much. I don't see any world that Utah makes the college football playoff as we stand here today.
Yeah, it felt a little bit like bend some more, and then don't break.
Yeah.
On Saturday against Kansas. But yeah, it's a 10-win season, a lot of positives, a lot of good things. But I think ultimately it's going to be one of those close but no cigar type of seasons for Utah football. A great bounce back year from the 5-7 year. But ultimately, I think the committee is looking at Utah and frankly looking at other Big 12 teams as well, kind of looking for reasons to drop them. Utah's given them a few here over the last couple of games.
They unfortunately have. And like you said, too, it's frustrating because we see what some of these other teams are doing. And it's like, well, there's arguments in some cases. Like, is there an argument Utah, Oklahoma? I think sure. But at the end of the day, I can also, like, if they're going to say, well, who has the best wins? You lost the two best teams you played. I mean, Utah's best win is against a team that's not currently ranked. Arizona State's not going to be ranked tomorrow night. And Cincinnati's obviously fallen off a cliff. Like, Utah won a win over a currently ranked top 25 teams. Like, that hurts you if you're Utah in this situation. I'm looking at like a BYU, at least they have the Utah win, right? Like, even Oklahoma, they have a really good Bama win. And that Oklahoma offense is a tough watch, but defensively, they keep coming to play. And the reason too, we talk about, like, how does Utah get in the CFP? Well, the teams in front of them have to lose. Well, a lot of these teams don't play, obviously, because it's conference championship weekend. So I think the only way a Utah would move ahead of a BYU is if BYU got embarrassed against Tech. I think if Bama got shut out, like, Utah could rise ahead of a Bama. But Notre Dame, they're in. Oklahoma, they're in. Ole Miss, I know there's a coaching change. They're not dropping out, nor should they drop out, even though I think they're as good today as they were yesterday. No, but you're not dropping a team out and going unranked. And we already said Miami's going to stay above Utah because they looked more impressive than the Utes this last week with a big win over Pitt, even if I don't love that Pitt team. And, we could say the same thing again about a Vandy team that I think has a good chance to be ranked above Utah when you look at their resume. And yeah, they don't have amazing wins either, but Tennessee, Missouri are arguably better wins than any wins that Utah has right now, Andrew. So like we said, there's just not really a path for this Utah team. Utah had to dominate these last two games to even make it a question, and they weren't able to do that. So they're going to be on the outside looking in Tuesday and eventually come Saturday.
Yeah, well, and on top of that, you've got Steve Sarkisian lobbying hard to get a 9-3 Texas team into the mix as well, and trying to set that precedent. I mean, I think that's the other thing you have to consider here is these, SEC and Big Ten teams, they're going to push as much as they can to set the precedent that a 3-loss team from one of those leagues is more valuable than a 2-loss or even a 1-loss team from the ACC or the Big 12. And, with network partnerships and all the other things, you don't want to get too cynical about this stuff, but at the end of the day, it's still kind of a TV show. You could certainly see Texas getting in over another team that was deserving with fewer losses.
Yeah, I was talking to my brother earlier tonight. He made the point of just like, is Texas going to jump Vandy and Utah? And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, Well, yeah, Texas has an extra loss, but they just beat Vandy. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a good point. Like Texas could jump us too. I think that'd be bad. I don't like that because the thing about Texas that gets me, Andrew, and this is the one thing I will say I'll give this committee some credit for, as frustrating as some of the decisions can be. The reason Utah was as high as they were is how dominant this Utah team had been. And a Texas team coming into the season, if you said to me Texas could get in with 3 losses, I'm like, you know what? Their schedule's tough enough. I could see a path. The problem is they don't look like one of the 12 best teams. They went to overtime with a Kentucky team that just lost 41-0 against Louisville. And I like Louisville, but I think crazy. Like, we're going to talk about how great this Texas team is. Why are you going to overtime with that this team has as well? So there's just all of these different games we can look at and be like, this Texas team, clearly not a top 12 team. And I think there was a time where Utah was ranked as high as they were because it's like, wow, this team looks like a juggernaut, but they haven't looked like a juggernaut. And honestly, Andrew, I said this on my show yesterday. Like, if you were to ask me, JT, is Utah one of the 12 best teams in college football right now? I'd say no. The defense has fallen off. They missed John Henry Daly. And this passing attack, I still like for Utah's passing offense. I wonder how they would do against the best teams. Ryan Davis missed the Kansas game. Like that's a huge loss if he's not out there. I can't sit here today and say the current way the Utah Utes are playing is one of the 12 best teams in college football. So that's part of the other reason when I look at it, as much as it frustrates me, I want Utah to be in. I'm okay with them not being in, Andrew, because I just don't think they're one of the 12 best teams right now.
Yeah, it's hard to make that case, right? It just is, and it's just one of those things where, you play the 12 games, you line them all up, and you see what happens. And unfortunately for Utah, they're just going to end up coming up short. They've been a little bit inconsistent here, as you mentioned, down the stretch. A lot of that's due to injury. Some of it's due to execution, as Kyle would tell you, on the defensive end, missing assignments and whatnot. But yeah, it shouldn't take away from a good season. It's just going to be one of those missed opportunity type things, kind of like when, they went to the Pac-12 championship, lost to Washington on that, borderline pass interference call that wasn't made, stuff like that. I think this is what that's what this season will end up looking like, is just kind of, it'll go down in fan lore as a close, but not good enough.
And you make a great point bringing up like how, hey, close but not close enough. But at the same time, you said this even early on, 10-2. Like, we were 5-7 last year. This is still a massive accomplishment that this team bounced back. You lost to a team that is clearly better than you in Texas Tech. Like, let's say Utah even made the Big 12 title game. I just don't see how this team beats Tech. And that's where it'll be interesting to see for BYU. I do think an 11-1 team should be in if you're BYU. But if you get blown out against Tech and you lose by 20 again, I don't really have, like, I'm not going to feel sorry for you if you're left out of the playoff if you don't look like you belong. So that's where this Utah team, you lose to a team like that. And then, yeah, you lost a narrow game on the road to BYU. And in a sport like college football, with as good as these teams are and as thin as the margins are, sometimes that's enough, unfortunately, to do you in. But still, such an impressive year for this group, this team, for Kyle Whittingham, another 10-win season too. Just remarkable what this team and program continue to achieve. But this team and program, they have a lot to replace in the transfer portal. Transfer portal just a week away. So what is Utah's transfer portal wish list? We're going to tell you in one moment. But first, this episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our friends at Omaha Steaks. The holidays always feel a little easier when you already know the perfect gift, and Omaha Steaks makes it almost too simple. Whether you're treating yourself this season or sending something memorable to a family and friend, Omaha Steaks delivers handcrafted perfection right to your door. And this week, it's the best time to jump in because their cyber sale is here and the deals are massive. The quality is exactly what you hope for when you order an Omaha steak. Incredibly tender, rich flavor, and meals that make hosting or weeknight cooking just easier. And the variety is underrated. You know about the great steaks, but how about burgers, comfort meals, sides, desserts? It's one of the gifts that truly fits anyone. Honestly, it's the kind of gift that brings people together, and you don't need to guess anyone's size. So save big on unforgettable gifts with Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com for 50% off site-wide and extra 20% off select favorites during the cyber sale. And for an additional $35 off, use promo code COLLEGE, all caps, no spaces, COLLEGE at checkout. That's omahasteaks.com, the promo code COLLEGE. Terms apply. See the site for details to get your Omaha steak today. Andrew, as is the case with college football now, the transfer portal is just all the rage, and it's going to be for this Utah team because they're going to have to turn to it to replace a lot of their best guys. Yes, this is still a program that does a good job developing players, but recruiting wise, it's not like they've landed. Spencer Fano, we expect to move on in this class, right? We'll see what Smith Snowden ends up doing, but there's not a bunch of 4-stars that are in this Utah football class right now. I like Obot. I'll also say, I don't think we should just automatically expect every true freshman offensive lineman we get now to start. Like Spencer Fano is a unicorn for a reason. He's literally arguably the best offensive lineman in the country. So don't just look and be like, oh, we got this freshman 4-star, 5-star, whatever he is at this point now, Obot. Don't just be like he's automatically starting. This Utah team, they had a really good season. They got a lot to replace. I mean, especially on the offensive line, Andrew. They're probably going to lose all 5 guys, which is crazy.
Yeah, it sounds like maybe there's a question as to whether or not Caleb Lomu would go. I think he's a go lean at this point, but I guess in the NIL era, you never know though. If you're a first-round pick in the NFL draft, you gotta go, right? But to your point, yeah, I mean, it starts up front for sure, probably on both lines, right? With the uncertainty with John Henry Daly's injury and how long that's going to sideline him for heading into the next year. So, yeah, lots to replace. A big wish list certainly should be coming for Utah football.
It's massive. And I'm curious, what is your number one positional need on this wish list? I'm curious if we match up. I think I have one that's off a lot of people's radar as we stand here today, still waiting to see a lot of the transfer portal chaos. What is your number one transfer portal wish list need for the Utah Utes?
I'm actually going to say linebacker.
Ooh. Okay.
I feel like a big part of why some of the run defense has been a little bit rough the last few weeks has been the linebackers kind of missing their assignments. Now, somebody who knows football way better than I do is going to come in and say, no, it's the defensive tackle missing the A gap and this, that, and the other, and throw the tape on for me and all that. And I'm willing to listen. But, with Barton moving on and, some of the depth issues that they've had at linebacker in the past, I do kind of feel like that would be a position where if they could, kind of make a splash in the transfer portal, that would be interesting, at least to me. I don't know. What do you think? Where are you at?
Well, I'll just say this really quick. Yes, is there plays where, hey, linebackers actually did their job, defensive tackles didn't do theirs? Yes. Andrew, when you've given up as much rushing yards these last few weeks as Utah has, everyone in that front seven's getting some of the blame. So I totally agree with you. Yeah, it's a team effort. And I like Jonathan Hall. I like Trey Reynolds. Those guys are good. I'm excited for what they can do, but they've had some rough outings too. And I think almost everyone in that front seven would say, we can be better. We're missing plays. We're missing assignments. Morgan Scalley would say, I need to be better, stopping the run as well too. So linebackers on my list. I actually went a little bit outside because for some of these positions, I'll talk about linebacker, why it's on the list, but not number one in a moment. I actually went tight end. And some of you might be listening to this and go, well, yeah, we lose Dallin Bentley, but we got JJ Buchanan. JJ Buchanan does not do much of the blocking. He's a very talented pass catcher, but he's a little light in the pants when it comes to the blocking aspect. Dallin Bentley was a huge part of this Utah offense this year. He had over 500 yards in total. And we also know the value that Utah places in their tight ends to block and mace plays. And look, I want more Semi Taulonga as much as the next guy, but Bentley is this big body, true number one tight end. And Utah, yes, they have their mismatched tight end in JJ Buchanan, but he's also more of a receiver than even a tight end in some ways. Utah needs a true number one tight end in this offense, I feel like. And outside of, Hunter Andrews coming back from injury, but even he's played, he's a running back, a linebacker, a tight end. Utah's played him in so many different positions. I think that this is a team that needs a true tight end because everyone else on this roster is really young too. Bentley was one of the biggest surprises of this year to me, Andrew. So that to me is a massive need that this team has. And I think they need to address because clearly Jason Beck in this Utah offense, despite doubts about how important tight end was coming into the year, ended up being a pretty important position for this team.
Yeah, well, and I think officially JJ has moved into that wide receiver room. So to your point, if Dallin Bentley, who I believe has potentially the opportunity to apply for a medical red shirt or some kind of extra year from an injury previously, if he's officially gone, and JJ's moved over to the wide receiver room, yeah, you got to replace that production and some big catches that Dallin was able to provide, and of course the blocking as well to get Wayshawn, if you can retain Wayshawn, to get him back and get him moving as well. So for sure, tight end is is one of those X factor positions for this Utah offense under Jason Beck.
Yeah, and we'll definitely be talking about that on a future episode of Locked On Utes. The retention guys, Dampier, Bird. How about even a Jason Beck, like Wayshawn, another one you just mentioned. Like all these guys have to be a priority for the Utah Utes to retain. But what are some of the other transfer portal positions this team needs to hit on? Number one, I also go with another one is defensive tackle. I mean, you lose Aliki Vaimahi, who's been here for years now. But look, once again, like you already talked about the run defense issues. A huge part of that is the defensive tackles not being able to eat up those double teams. Another year for Jonah Lae, another year for Dallas Vakalaki. I think we'll both do those guys some good players I like, but have also had some rough outings as of late. And I look at some of those freshman defensive tackles and I go, okay, I think you guys can get better, but also better doesn't automatically go, boom, Keanu Tanavasa, like 2.0 right there, like a guy who Tanavasa would have helped this Utah defense a lot. So they did not go to the transfer portal last year for a D tackle. They should have with how much they lost, and it hurt them. And I hope this year they go into the portal and grab a defensive tackle. Some of the other positions I look at for this Utah team is wide receiver. You're going to lose Ryan Davis, and a lot of the wide receivers were disappointing this year. Larry Simmons, I like the way he came on late in the season too. So hopeful that he can still do some stuff. You get a Darden Zipper back next year, another year with Tobias Merriweather. Hopefully that's better, but this team needs to continue to try and find those special playmakers at the wide receiver position. And the best way to do that is transfer portal. You mentioned linebacker. That's on my list as well too. It's not as high because I'm looking at a Christian Thatcher, a Cyrus Polu, two high recruits that Utah added that I think they will do good stepping up. But that doesn't mean Utah shouldn't bring in a veteran linebacker, whether it was Mahmoud Diabate coming over from Florida to Utah, Levi Damuni a few years with Stanford. This Utah team, it's been nice to have that veteran presence in the room, and I still think they could really use that, even though I like the strides that Jonathan Hall and Trey Reynolds made overall in the season. Last couple of games, like we mentioned, have been rough too. And the other one is offensive line. I don't know how this team doesn't add a transfer offensive lineman. They only added one last year, probably losing all 5 starters. So that's another position I look at too and go, I really think Utah could use some more help here too. What do you think of those spots, and which other ones too would you go? This is a position where Utah needs to add more in the portal.
Yeah, I forgot about Thatcher. I think he's going to be a stud. Mm-hmm. So you're absolutely right on that one. Yeah, I mean, I think that if you can send your entire offensive line to the NFL, or at least into NFL camps this offseason, you can make a pretty compelling case that this is a program that develops those guys and positions them well for the NFL. So if you've got a junior, offensive guard or tackle in the transfer portal, I certainly think that you make a compelling case to those guys to step right in, plug and play, and then move on to the NFL. So interior offensive line is certainly an area where you would need some help. Yeah. Utah fans and the wide receiver position. I mean, what a tough relationship that has been over the years. Every year we feel like we've solved that in the offseason, and every year some of those guys come up short. Is it scheme? Is it player? Which is it? But yeah, of course you're going to always want to add somebody in that room. And then maybe the back end of your secondary as well, right? You've got some guys that have played well in the defensive backfield, but you'll have a Nate Ritchie coming off an injury. You'll have, some of these other guys that have struggled at times. And so could you bring in a safety that can not only cover, but play in the box? That would be another guy that you could certainly look at, another position that you could look at to really try to solidify this team for a run next year.
Yeah, I look at another area too, cornerback, right? Like if Smith Snowden decides to go pro, you're losing Blake Cotton too. I think Elijah Davis would come back, and I like a lot of the transfers Utah added last year that only got to play in sparingly this year, but that's another position where you always need cornerbacks, especially with how heavy Utah is from a man-to-man perspective. You mentioned the John Henry Daly injury earlier. I mean, if he's going to miss extended time, this team needs to continue to add explosive pass rushers, right? I look at a guy like a Jackson Jones from Oregon last year, and he, I don't even know if he ever ended up seeing the field this year, like a Lance Holtzclaw from Washington, saw it somewhat and was okay, but like by far Utah, and also Logan Fano did walk on senior day. I don't think he should go pro yet. Like, I don't see, if you're not a top 60 pick and you have more eligibility, you should stay to me, but we'll see. He might try to go pro, and then you're okay. We just lost our 2 best pass rushers. That hurts. So I'm really curious to see how this Utah team would navigate that. And when I say lose your 2 best pass rushers, like we'll see when John Henry Daly comes back. It's just a severe injury, but a lot to shop for in the portal, and potentially more if some guys get plucked away, which honestly will probably happen. Like last year, Keanu Tanuvasa, Cameron Calhoun happened. There's probably some of these guys that aren't going to be on this roster. I hope I'm wrong. I want them all back, obviously, because they're great players. It was a fun team to root for, and we want to run it back. But that's just not realistic in today's era of college football. But football season outside of the bowl game is almost done. Basketball underway on the Huntsman. It's been a wild season for the men's basketball team and a very interesting one for the women's team as well, too. We're going to tell you a little bit more about it in one moment. But first, this episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. The World Cup is coming back to North America for the first time since 1994. And with 48 teams for the first time ever, it's going to be massive. But let's be honest, getting tickets is usually the hardest part. That's why the Game Time app is clutch, finally giving fans a real advantage when it comes to snagging tickets. With Game Time, you can track prices dropping in real time, get alerts when great seats open, and buy tickets the moment they hit the app. Puts the power back in your hands and makes going to the World Cup realistic instead of impossible. The seat view feature is a game changer with Game Time. You literally see what the pitch looks like from your exact seat before you buy. Plus, prices included the fees up front, which I love. No last-second surprises at checkouts, which can be such a headache. But you can take the headaches and the guesswork out of buying World Cup tickets with Game Time. Every match, every concert, or event with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege, all caps, no spaces. Purchase terms do apply. Again, that's promo code. Again, download the app and make sure to use that promo code LOCKEDONCollege, all caps, no spaces, for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go download Game Time today. Andrew, what an interesting season it's been for the Runnin' Utes. Oh my goodness. This team lost to Cal Poly, went to overtime against Weber State. Shout out Big Sky. But like, what if we're going to be anything in the Big 12, which we knew we weren't going to be a top 3 team in the conference, but like we were hoping to be respectable. It was teetering on, is this team going to be respectable? The results were not promising. And thankfully, Utah is showing a little more promise. A good win against Ole Miss, although I do still wonder how good the Rebels team is this year because they just lost to Iowa as well, too. It just feels like the EC took a step back this year, too. But been a really interesting season so far for Alex Jensen, his first year with this team running Utes. They are 6-2 on the year so far, but they've played a lot of cupcakes outside of Ole Miss, and Grand Canyon's not bad either, obviously. But I mean, what do you make of the start that the Utah Utes are off to?
Yeah, it's been an interesting start, to say the least. I mean, I think there's been a lot of positive things. There's obviously some juice back in the building in the Huntsman Center. A lot of things to be excited about with this new era. But yeah, I think we all kind of knew it was going to be a little bit bumpy, and unfortunately, they got caught by a Cal Poly team that really got hot, from behind the 3. And that was really the difference in that game. They didn't defend well in that game. They didn't defend well against Grand Canyon. And I think, it's interesting. They had a lot of close wins in the non-con at home. And I think it's a little bit hard for a coach to get the team's attention to play harder, to play more connected when you still win, right? Yeah. And so it's almost like they needed to get bit a couple of times for him to finally get their attention. And against Ole Miss, they came out with an unbelievable energy, unbelievable pace. And, they weren't able to Ole Miss was not able to take Terrence Brown away exclusively because Don McHenry stepped up with 27 points, had just a huge game. He's got quick hands. He's got a real nice shot. And, if they can bring that to the table and make it so that the other team can't just shut down one guy and thus shut down the offense, it's going to make a big difference in how they play moving forward, beginning with Cal on Tuesday night and then moving into Big 12 play.
Yeah, it's still early, still a lot to discover about this team, but you have in your little bio down here too, running Utes and Big 12 hoops. How does this team, do you feel like they're going to fare in Big 12 play based on what we've seen from the rest of the conference so far?
Well, on my most recent episode of the podcast, I put out my kind of first month Big 12 power rankings. Heading into the season, I had Utah 10. Right now, I've got them at 16. Yeah. Based on what they have accomplished and what everybody else has accomplished. The conference itself has done really, really well in the non-con. They're 32-16 against other Power 5 teams in the non-con. That's a way better pace than they were at last year at this time. And so I do think the competition has gotten better. Now, that said, there are other teams in the league, including Kansas State, this very night that we're recording, that have lost those bye games, right? Those teams that come in, they pay them $100,000, and for their trouble, they beat them, right? And so I think there are opportunities in this league. It's just going to be a matter of, how connected this team can stay throughout, and how bought in they can continue to be to Alex Jensen's system. By all accounts, this is a group of guys, at least the rotation guys, that are all bought in. It's just a matter of getting them in the right place and frankly getting Keanu Dawes to turn it up a notch.
Yeah, because that's a guy we had big expectations for coming into the year. Is scoring in double figures, but you need him to continue to take that next step. I saw Ezra Asar is played very well for USC right now, by the way, because that's the tough part about the transfer portal. It's just hard to keep and retain everyone. And I think we said even in the season preview when you were on Andrews, like sometimes before things get better, they have to get worse. We'll see if that's the case for Utah. And even if they're not worse, even if it's neutral or slightly improved, Big 12 got a lot better, it feels like. And in Utah, as of right now, it feels like they didn't. So we'll be interesting to see how this team all comes together, especially because they still got some time, obviously, till we get in the thick of Big 12 play. But switch from the men's side to the women's side now. They took care of business in their kind of cupcake games overall. And, life came at them fast. A ranked Washington team lost that 72-61. You host Syracuse, but even they beat you pretty good, 61-49. And then the UConn game, you get trounced, 93-41. Granted, that's the number one team in the country. I could also say, granted, like to fight a little bit more in that one too. So still a team as we sit here. It's like, okay, they're 5-3, but they've played most of the wins have come against bad. They've scheduled pretty much all of their wins so far. So what do you make of their start to the season, and how is Gavin Peters and his squad going to fare in their second year in the Big 12?
Yeah, there's a ton of talent on this roster, but a lot of it's young talent. Avery Yelmstead, the freshman, she kind of got thrust into action when Reese Ross had to sit out for an injury against Weber State. She had 12 points, but she had all 12 of those in the fourth quarter, right? And so I think that with the young players playing so much, there's just going to be a lot of bumpy moments for this team. And like you said, I mean, you just can't go up against a team like UConn and have bumpy moments. The big issue that the women's team has had so far this year is taking care of the ball. They turn it over at a ridiculous clip. At one point, it was up near 20 a game. Now, they've remedied that the last two games against Weber and Montana. But to your point, shouts to Big Sky, shouts to the Big Sky commish. But, they're still Big Sky teams. And so, they play a road game this weekend. They play a road game on Thursday at Colorado State. I think that's going to tell us a lot about them. And then they've got a couple more home games before they get into Big 12 play. Right now, I think their preseason projection of 8-10, right around there was where they were picked. I think that's kind of accurate for what we've seen from this team so far.
One last thing I'll ask you about, you mentioned a little bit earlier, is you feel like there's a little bit of the rejuvenated energy in the Huntsman. You still see people talking about the curtains and things of that nature too. What have you made of the support that both these teams are getting? And do you think there's anything that can be done to improve it outside of winning games?
Yeah, I think they could give tickets away. And I don't say that to be, indelicate, I guess, but my observation has been that, like in football, you got to buy into the muss, and there's a reason for that, right? The muss fills up, it goes all the way to the top of the stadium. It's loud, all this stuff. I think you have to do that too in basketball, but that's just not a huge student section right now. And so the students are kind of smattered throughout the Huntsman Center. Just from what I've seen, I went to the opener against San Jose State. There were a ton of students there, but they weren't in a concentrated area. Yeah. And I think that's one thing that you could kind of do is just say, hey, if you're a student, you get in and go sit in this section, right? Like don't spread those students out. I think that's one thing. A lot of people have complained about in-game, entertainment, during timeouts and stuff like that. And so I think there's a lot of game day stuff that they could do. And, if we're being honest, they probably should have waited to see what the product on the floor was going to look like before just, raising ticket prices on some folks just because Alex Jensen was coming back. You know what I mean? It's one of those things where you got to see it on the floor. It's got to be an enjoyable product, but then the game day atmosphere has to be good, and you got to give people a reason to be there. And so there's just a lot of things that need to improve from a game day operations perspective.
Yeah, there's things that could be improved there. As we talked about, things to improve on the court as well. Andrew, always appreciate you coming on and breaking down the game for us, football or basketball. Please let everyone know where they can find your show at.
Yeah, at Running Hoops Pod over on X. Got a real good guest lined up for this Cal preview that's coming out on Tuesday morning. I think folks are going to really enjoy that. And wherever you get a podcast, Running Hoops Podcast, would love to have your ears after you listen to Locked On Utes, of course.
You were too kind, my friend. And hey, former Pac-12 matchup, RIP. We'll be tuning in later tonight. Andrew, thanks for joining me.
The Utes have won 6 in a row against Cal.
Really?
And 3 in a row at Haas Pavilion. So,
and
just a little nugget for you there.
Is this their first time with the old Utah Valley coach there too?
Yeah, with Mark Madsen.
Yeah, Mark Madsen. So that'll be a fun one tonight. Looking forward to watching that one. And just like always, looking forward to having you on. Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks a lot.
That's going to do it for today's Locked On Utes. We'll be back tomorrow to talk about the latest chaos happening in the world of Utah football and Utah athletics.